Here on March 20th at Truckee Meadows Community College, Las Vegas. I can see you guys up on the screen. I'm assuming you can hear us. Yes. And Elko, you're not up on the screen, but I'm hoping you're with us.
Yeah, we can hear you in Elko.
Sound loud and clear. Okay. So we'll go to item 8, 2015 Nevada State Legislative Session. Item A, Nevada Department of Wildlife Legislative Report, Management Analyst 3, Legislative Liaison Tim Jolly. The department will provide a report on the 2015 legislative session and activities. Ms. Jolly.
Yes, this is Kim Jolly with NDOW for the record, Management Analyst 3, Legislative Liaison. I'm going to give kind of a general report on the legislative activities that have been going on and bills that the department has testified on and kind of a overview of actions and then maybe some upcoming hearings. So stop me if you have questions as I go through. I think the last support material that you received was related to the committee actions and some of the bills related to that, and then I reserved a tracker report because things change hourly. So, but we're still tracking the same bills, and what's happened since then is just BDRs or bill draft requests. Legislative proposals have become bills, so now some of them have language. But what I'll do is I'll just kind of walk through the wildlife-focused bills. We are tracking bills related to operation of our state agency, state employees, law enforcement, public lands, water, wildlife habitat, and a variety of issues that other resource agencies would be tracking. As far as wildlife related, I'll try to kind of shrink it down just for our purposes today, unless you want to bring up other ones. Recently, one of the department's bills, Assembly Bill 35, it's making changes relating to vessels. This was the department's vessel or a whole identification compliance bill was recently approved by the governor. So that is a done deal. So that was just a cleanup bill, and I can say our division administrator for operations, Bob Plant, testified on that, and I believe Captain Dave Feffner on the law enforcement aspects of that. And that helps us to comply with Coast Guard laws and poll numbers, and we'll be implementing that shortly. But that's pretty quickly. We're still in March, and it's already gotten through the process, so it can be done. And then the next one I'll bring to your attention is another department bill, AB 78. And this is what we've nicknamed our elk application fee bill. Our director, Tony Wasley, and other staff have testified on this several times. It recently had its a hearing in the Senate Natural Resources Committee in early March, and that was heard, and so we're waiting for that to be scheduled for a work session where they actually vote on that. AB 82, another wildlife, or another NDOW bill, that was heard the same day in Senate Natural Resources. And Deputy Director Patrick Cates testified on that. That's the fiscal cleanup bill you remember that we've brought before you before. So what's happened is those two assembly bills made it through the assembly committees, the assembly floor. Now they're over on the other side to the Senate committee. So that after that occurs, we'll go to the Senate floor and then on to the governor and so on. So they're almost there. What a ways. Let's see. Next, for your purposes, Assembly Bill 136. This was a bill, they're all very general, the title. It makes various changes related to wildlife. This bill actually originally was to exempt from the requirements of hunter education persons who are mentally or physically disabled, and it was going to permit any firearm during archery season for self-defense. So what happened was This had a hearing in Assembly Natural Resources, and there was a lot of testimony. There were constituents of Assemblyman Ellison that were video conferenced from Elko. Lots of emotion and lots of various things. And what's occurred since then is it was obvious that there were some amendments that were going to need to be made. Even the sponsor was supportive of making amendments. And so since then, NDOW staff and director, deputy director, had been working on amendments in coordination with the committee members and Chairwoman Robin Titus from Natural Resources. And as of today, the chairwoman indicated that she would accept the amendments and would schedule a work session with our amendments. And that is scheduled March 24th, was that next Tuesday at 1:30 for a work session. What the amendments are, and we'll probably get into these a little later, but it's basically doing what the sponsors wanted to accommodate persons with disabilities through verbal testing and any other accommodation for them to test hunter education anywhere in the state, not just Las Vegas Arena, but also Elko, and to ensure that that occurs per, of course, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then to permit a firearm with, exactly the same language that we have in the regulation that you just passed with the 8-inch limit. And then the committee members also wanted to include during muzzleloader season. So that is what the amendment looks like, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little later. But they accepted that, so that's what we will be expecting. We haven't seen the mock-up for the work session yet, but we're taking her at her word. It was the chairwoman who communicated that. So, Assembly Bill 142 revises provisions governing administration and enforcement of wildlife laws. This bill would eliminate the authority of the Wildlife Commission and the department to revoke or suspend licenses, and the demerit system and grant that authority to the courts. This recently had a hearing in Assembly Natural Resources. Our Chief Game Warden, Tyler Turnipseed, testified. It was a very long hearing, and a lot of questions. And so I expect that they're going to have probably maybe another hearing. We haven't heard any more word on that. But the department testified opposed. Let's see. Okay. Notably, I guess wildlife related, Assembly Bill 217 was BDR 43-994, has become a bill, and it has been scheduled a hearing. This is the bill that would eliminate OHV registration by a number of committee members. It's scheduled for Assembly Committee on Transportation on Tuesday, March 24th, 2015. The department hasn't taken a position on that because the committee hasn't heard yet. It just became a bill, but they've already scheduled it. AB 261, authorizing local governments to establish programs for the managed care of feral cat colonies, was just heard last week in Assembly Government Affairs. The department, our veterinarian, Perry Wolf, and Deputy Director Jack Robb attended that hearing and testified with our concerns for wildlife, but we also offered amendments if this happens to protect wildlife areas, protect the release of any feral cats that they perform TNR on, or establishment or maintaining a feral cat colony in areas of wildlife concern, state or federally managed lands. I'm not sure where the amendment's going, but that's what we testified to. Okay, Okay, let's get into some trapping ones. Several BDRs have now become bills related to trapping. So AB 335 was BDR 4531, and this is revises provisions governing trapping of wildlife by Assemblyman Wheeler. And this bill is only about not even 2 pages long, almost 2 pages. It's very short. It just inserts the word leg hold in front of trap. So any steel leg hold trap is what they've added. I haven't seen that scheduled yet, and we haven't taken a position on that, but because it just became a bill. AB 338 revises provisions governing wildlife. And this is another new one. This is BDR 4526 that just got language. Basically strikes all of the mandatory trap registration language and makes it may. If it is registered, it's permanently marked and it's permanent. And then it also, in section 3, further says, requires the commission to adopt regulations on shed antlers for commercial purposes. So it says the commission shall ensure that regulations do not restrict or otherwise adversely affect taking of shed antlers in the state for non-commercial purposes, and it doesn't really define commercial purposes other than what commercial purposes is not. If you guys want to look at the language, we can do that. What else? And wildlife related. An interesting one that I was tracking that was a BDR that's now a bill. I don't know the legalities of this. I was questioning. BDR 1060 is now AB 408. And this is enacting provisions restricting the federal government from owning land in Nevada. So, and it's got other provisions. I haven't really read all of it yet, but I wonder, I don't know how that can happen, but, and then AJR2 related to wildlife. This is one that was heard very early on, I think in February, just urging the United States Congress and Fish and Wildlife Services to take actions to reduce the impact of ravens on the greater state drought. That was heard in Assembly Natural Resources, and it was amended to just include ravens also for the protection of desert torques. So I think I haven't seen that scheduled yet, but that's what happened with that. Senate Bill 4 by Senator Settlemyre was heard. This is was providing exemptions for registration of trapping on private property. This was, we attended this hearing and just testified neutral. There were several amendments presented. The one that was accepted by the committee was to kind of did some different things to the language, and we'll get into that with the committee. But it not only exempts them from private property, but has an NRS inserted in there that the existing language on you have to have signage that the land is private property. It inserts it in there, and then it has some other provisions governing exemption for government employees and related to rodent control and things like that. Let's see. SB 41, this is another department bill that's making its way through the process. This is our electronic duck stamp bill that is making its way through. It's just another compliance bill. And it got a due pass on the Senate side, and then it's been just actually yesterday, got a due pass on the Assembly side for that bill. And I think I'm about done. Oh, no. Okay, so SB 130, this is the consolidation bill. This was heard very recently, no action, it was a joint meeting of both Natural Resources Committees. The department opposed it, lots of discussion there. There's a lot of follow-up questions and requests for information that we're going to provide to the committee. Next one of interest, the SB 163 bill, creating the Advisory Council on Nevada Wildlife Conservation and Education. This was heard pretty recently. There wasn't any action. It was heard in the Senate Natural Resources Committee. It is scheduled for this week. Tuesday. For a work session. And there was an amendment. This is the bill that creates the bill that creates the advisory council and adds a $3 fee onto all licenses to fund education about sportsmen and what they've done and the positive how wildlife management is funded. There it is. And there was an amendment presented. Yeah, so it's March 26th, Thursday at 1:30. There was an amendment presented that would amend the non-resident fee to $10 for hunting, fishing, and trapping licenses. And yeah. And then it had some other language in there, doing different parts of that. The department was present for that testimony, and there was a lot of testimony on both sides of the issue, and I think we were supposed to end, so it wasn't. I think that there's probably going to be some, I don't know which amendments, probably this one, that are going to be included when they have that work session. A work session is where they just vote on the bill, and usually they do print the amendments so everybody can see it, but I haven't seen which amendment they're accepting, if they're accepting more than one. Are we good for now? Does anybody have any questions? Do you just want to go through the whole thing, or?
Questions for Kim from the commission? Okay.
I have like just 8 more.
8 more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. SB 235, provisions relating to wildlife. This is by Senator Goitia. It amends the definition of wildlife, and it's kind of a peculiar one to
Actually, Kim, I've talked to the sponsor, that bill's been pulled, so
Is it pulled? Okay.
we can skip that one.
Alrighty. SB 277, we recently got a fiscal request on this, creating the Nevada Environmental Policy Act. We're still analyzing this one. SB 278 is another OHB bill by Sullivan Settlemyer. It's removing the requirement for a notarized signature from the owner on the application for registration. And then SB 387 is another one to watch. It revises the provisions relating to wild horses and burros. That came out yesterday by Senator Mendoza. Is that 307? 387?
Thank you.
We can pull that up. I haven't heard that one yet. But, and then SB 398. This is prohibiting the sale or transfer of ivory under certain circumstances. And I know a number of the public contacted me about this and wanted us to look at this one. SB 417 just came out, hot off the presses, prohibiting the use of telemetry data to hunt or kill game mammals or game birds. And NDEL's already working on some language, I think, to amend this. I think it has a different intent before the language came out, and so. And then SJR1, another resolution urging Congress to enact legislation to transfer federal public lands to the state of Nevada. We just watched that one, we didn't testify. And then SJR 5, the expresses support for the Nevada Sage Grouse Conservation Plan, which switched that. And then SJR 11, proposing to amend the Nevada Constitution to preserve the right to hunt, fish, or trap. That has a hearing scheduled the same day as SB 168 next week. That is a quick little roundup of what's going on there.
Questions? Karen?
I guess I do have some concerns, and I'm not, is this the time that we can ask about the specific bills?
Yeah, anything on the department report is fair game at this point.
Okay, on AB 261, which is the feral cat issue, right? Yeah, so, I mean, I guess I understand where the department's coming from in some respects in terms of the amendment that was proposed by Dr. Wolf. That seemed to be, very reasonable. It did concern me that I know that Indel has already taken a stand against basically feral cats, but my concern is that I think this is enabling legislation allowing counties to implement these programs, and since the feral cat programs are an effort, the trap, neuter, and return programs are an effort to reduce the number of feral cats. I just would urge the department to, take a look at that and not totally, and it sounds like based on Dr. Wolf's testimony that the department is recommending an amendment. Is that, Kim, is that what I'm understanding at this time?
Where's Deputy Director Jack Grove? Yes, Kim Jolly for the record. We testified in a opposition, but we brought an amendment. And here's the situation. This is already being implemented at Clark County, and Washoe County is already, Washoe County Animal Services, we actually went and testified there when it was heard as a public hearing item there locally, and they were directed by their county commission to move forward and find a way. And so, as early as April 14th, their commission is going to have a public hearing on the feral cat ordinance. However, so that's why we have an amendment, because we see it going forward. But by putting this language, this amendment language in a statute, that kind of alleviates our regional staff and ourselves from having to testify at every single county where they have an ordinance just to get the same language in there. So that was the reason. And this is actually already in the Clark County ordinance. So, that we figure if it's good enough for Clark County, like at least Washoe County can adopt this. I'm not sure. I know from the county perspective, the animal services and the management, they're fine with this. I think they contacted me actually yesterday and said the Humane Society didn't want any restricting language. And so that, we're just trying to work with it. And yeah, so I know Washoe County wants managed cat colonies. They don't want free range, anyone being able to, but they want someone tracking them, knowing where they are. And so that's where this language is. Prohibited near or in any conservation area, state or federal land, including National Park Service, National Forest, or BLM land, wetlands, or any other lands managed by wildlife. So private land, whatever you want to do, but this is basically what our recommendation was.
Thank you.
Additional questions on the report? Okay. Hearing none, we will go to item 8B, Legislative Committee Update, Chairman Drew informational. Chairman Drew will report on the Commission's Legislative Committee recommendations and actions.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but from the Bert Gurr for the record.
Let me get this.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Way up here. Oh.
Excuse me, and maybe this isn't the right time, Mr. Chairman, but
what, maybe someone could explain to me what the role of the cabs is in the legislative process, as it's going down right now. Because it seems to me that we had agenda items on our agenda to act on, and nobody at the meeting had a clue what we were talking about.
Okay.
I mean, no presentation from the department, no presentation from anybody on the CAD, because I just saw it. Do we make recommendations to your legislative committee from the CAD, or to the commission from the CAD on the legislation that's out there?
It's a good question. So, Mr. Gurr, to address that, and I think this is probably a good time to do it as part of our legislative committee update. The committee met, I can't remember the date, a couple weeks ago to go over which bills we had language for. And we went through those that we felt were important to wildlife, identified them, proposed a position that this commission could take, and those were captured in a 2-page handout that I believe was posted online because the committee meeting was later than when the rest of the hard copy packet went out. Certainly the cabs are more than welcome to comment on any legislation that we're tracking or identify bills of interest to that cab. It's a difficult thing to do to time our commission process with the legislative process, because the minute you put something in writing, the next day it's almost out of date. And so what we did at the top of the worksheet that came out of the legislative committee is we noted where that language could be assessed. We identified the website on Nellis where you could pull up the language. And if there's recommendations on the bills of interest that we're tracking on maybe how we can get some of that out to the cabs better to improve that understanding, I'm all ears. It's just difficult to try and print it all out, get it to the cabs and not have it be able to.
Truly, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that we need it sent to us, but something to tell us where to go look.
Okay.
And because I am fairly new to the process here, I just don't know how you do it. I'm very aware of the process from the Realtor Association point of view. I chaired their committee twice over the years, and I served on the Real Estate Commission, so I have some ideas about how it should work, or how it works there, but I don't know how it works here. But if, when they're in the BDR form, maybe the cabs can get the BDRs, and then we can pull them up and look at them then.
In
Right.
bill form where there's language. There's
And
no
then in
language
bill
in
form.
BDR, right?
On the
In the BDR form,
No.
huh?
But Kim Jolly, for the record, it was my understanding that the committee action report was distributed to the cabs, right? After I did it, that's what I understood. With the
No.
hyperlinks. It wasn't sent in your packet 4 weeks before, because we hadn't had the meeting yet. But I only took like 6 or 7 days to listen to that and then develop this, so I'm sorry, it was my understanding that
Timing
you
is
guys
difficult.
saw this, yeah.
Timing is difficult, I can agree with that, and we're moving faster this session than we have in years. But if when you're gonna have a legislative committee meeting in this group, you can send that same
Yes,
information
they
over and get
could.
it.
Okay,
from the cabs, and maybe it's sent, maybe I just didn't know where to look. But I would pay attention if it came, because this is the stuff that's really important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So what we'll do is we'll make sure any of the committee agendas and support material go to the cabs at least via email. Suzanne,
I'm sorry, what was
going forward, just making sure that the committee agendas are emailed to the cabs
they are.
and any support material. Okay, I'm hearing that they are. And then any reports that come out of the committee be emailed to the cabs as well, which should have happened. I know that information is all posted online under the committee website as well as the general commission website.
And I'll just make another note.
Kelly, for the record, in the past 4 sessions that I've been here, I've always offered my cell phone for when your CAB does meet. If I can't be there, for you to call me and put me on speaker and I will walk through, because I've done that a few times, but, so that's an option too. And we are putting all of the tracking reports under, like, if you look at our front page, it says legislative presentations. If you click that, there's also legislative tracking reports that we're putting there. And then this committee action report was actually posted under commission agenda support material, so I can see where that would be confusing. But now it's also under the committee, so, you know, I guess we can also, like I said, I have my contact information. kjolly@ndalt.org, and I will offer to get on the phone with you whenever your CAB meets, or send you the things directly. I have a list, an interested persons list, that I can send the things as they get done, so.
Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chairman, do we have, I guess I probably didn't look online to get a copy of that legislative committee report. Do we have extra copies of that available to us?
Yeah. Right, are they back there at the table? Yeah.
You could, I don't know that, I printed mine offline.
Okay.
If the rest of the commissioners don't have them, then we should get those handed out, as so long as copies are also available for the public.
Right, and on paper. Well, I know I sent, this, yeah, this was in our support material, and online, and then I have it up here right now. She did go online and see. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was emailed to the commissioners as well after, because the timing of the meeting was after the original mail out. So all of this kind of speaks to the challenge that we have with the rate at which the legislature is presently operating. So we go from a BDR to a bill, and then those bills are introduced so quickly, and we're getting very short notice, and they're also being amended at a rate that is really challenging for us to keep up with. So certainly, I think there's room for improvement as far as communicating with the CABs and others, but there remain significant challenges in being responsive given the time frame in which things are occurring.
Okay? So do we have extra hard copies of the committee report document? Suzanne, is that what you're checking?
So Kim Jolly, sorry, but this is the challenge in video conferencing and electronic documents, I guess. So I guess we'll just need to know, because we had understood that, the hyperlink was good enough, and that since this was already sent out, that was good enough, but we can certainly print the bills and just do like hard copy style for the future.
I think the main thing to keep in mind is when the report comes out of the committee, making sure that, we put the note on top, so folks know where to access the bills and the updated language and the history. We have the hyperlink to the original introduction language. Kim, maybe we can add your contact information, and we just need to make sure that gets emailed at a minimum to the commissioners prior to the meeting, as well as the county advisory boards at the same time, and make sure it's available to any interested public on the website.
And all of that was done, but I apologize if it wouldn't, if people didn't actually, maybe we can do a re-receipt or re-delivery or something to make sure.
Okay?
Could I just ask one question, because we get so, particularly for this meeting, we receive so many emails through Suzanne's address, that you're trying to keep track of everything. And so if something like this, that, in other words, it's not a part of our package, if we could, do the little exclamation point to say, hey, this is, you really need to see this kind of deal, that would, I think that would help me a little bit more. I mean, everything we get is important, but just trying to process everything as it's coming in, particularly this time because of all the emails, was really difficult to do, so.
Understood. And the next meeting in April will be purely legislative, so we'll have an opportunity to improve the delivery system. Any other discussion at this point? All right, hearing none. In terms of 8B, there was the legislative committee action report that was emailed out that identified the bills that we went through. We only addressed the bills that we actually had language to. There was a lot of things that were still in BDR that we didn't have an opportunity to look at. But the 4 end-out bills that Kim had mentioned, that this body had reviewed in June and supported in concept, the committee recommended for support. That was AB 35 on the whole numbers, AB 78 on the Elk application fee bill, AB 82 on the fiscal cleanup language, and SB 41 on the federal deduct stamp. So those were all supported by the committee for recommendation to the commission. AB 136, which was the special hunting license provision, the provision to exempt folks from hunter safety, and the provision that also includes hunting with archery equipment and allowance of carrying a firearm. The committee's recommendation on that was to oppose AB 136 as written, but provide statutory authority to empower the commission to adopt regulations to accommodate those with disabilities with respect to hunter education, licensing, and manner of take. We supported the statutory language on the carry of firearms during the archery season, so long as it was consistent with the temporary regulation adopted by the commission through our public process. AB 142, which would essentially do away with the demerit system and enforcing wildlife laws, the committee recommendation was to oppose. SB 4, which was exemption for certain type of registration for trapping wild mammals on private property. We supported the concept of removing private property from registration requirements that was adopted, but there was a reference in there to NRS 207.200, which requires posting of private property, and the committee's recommendation was to strike that reference and apply it to all private property. Our fear was with the NRS 207.200 citation that kind of gets us back into the same issues that we've discussed in the past in terms of what is properly marking. SB 130, the bill to convert the Department of Wildlife into the Division of Wildlife under State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The committee proposed opposition to that. SB 163, which creates the Advisory Council on Nevada Wildlife Conservation and Education. The committee supported the concept, so long as the council is required to educate the general public on the following: history of wildlife in Nevada, the benefits of wildlife to its citizens, wildlife management, wildlife recreation opportunities in the state, and in terms of the fee increase that Kim mentioned, we wanted to remain neutral on that until we got more feedback from the county advisory boards. In regards to AGR 2, that was the resolution that urges the Congress and Fish and Wildlife Service to take actions to reduce the impact of common ravens on greater sage grouse populations. The committee recommendation was to support that. At that time, I don't know that there was an amendment to add the desert tortoise language. In terms of SJR 1, Senate Joint Resolution 1, which urges Congress to enact legislation transferring title to certain public lands to the state in accordance to a report prepared by the Nevada Land Management Task Force. The committee recommendation was to oppose that as there was some conflicts with our Commission Policy 64 regarding transfer of public lands. On SGR 5, which expresses the support for the 2014 Nevada Greater Sage Grouse Conservation Plan developed by the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council, and urges the United States Fish and Wildlife Service not to list the greater sage grouse as endangered or threatened under the ESA. The committee recommended the commission support that resolution. The other recommendations made by the committee, our next legislative committee meeting will be April 1st, April Fool's Day at 1 p.m. at the NDOW office. So we'll try and get, or make sure to get out via email and web the agenda and tracking sheet for that. And then we recommended that the commission consider its telephonic legislative meeting the week of April 13th through 17th. And this is all kind of to correlate with legislative deadlines. And it sounds like due to space and timing locations that April 15th is going to be the date that we're going to shoot for. It's a Wednesday. So we have a room available to us. What we'll do is open the NDOW office in Vegas through conference line, and the NDOW office in Elko through conference line. So folks can attend and commissioners can attend telephonically. That's the report that I had from the committee, but I'm welcome to answer any questions as best I can. Okay. Seeing none, what we'll do is move to item 8C, commission position and platform on bills for possible action. The commission will review bills of interest, consider legislative committee recommendations, and may take official positions on those bills. The commission may also choose to develop platforms on bills by supporting or opposing general concepts contained within bills rather than specific language. With that, I'm comfortable working through the list of committee recommendations to see if the commission has an interest in supporting or modifying those recommendations by the committee. I know it's going to be difficult to look at any new bills today in terms of language, so I would probably suggest that the commission not develop specific bills, but if there's bills of interest and we want to develop general platform, that would give me plenty to represent at the legislature while we're there, if that's the flavor of the bill. Any questions before we move into that? Okay, what I'll do is I'll try and start with the legislative committee report, and we'll take the first 4 bills kind of in one block, simply because they're bills that this body has heard before. I'll ask if there's CAB or public input on these, and then see where that leaves us. After that, I think we'll step through one at a time. So in regards to the first 4 bills that the department has proposed, AB 35, which is whole identification number, which is already done and signed by the governor. AB 78, which is the application fee bill, give the commission authority to raise that fee from $5 to $10 if needed in the future. That has already passed the Assembly and is in the Senate, so still an active bill. AB 82, fiscal cleanup, which is changing the names on some of Endow's accounting. Again, this one has passed the Assembly and is in the Senate, so it is still active. And SB 41, which is the federal e-duck stamp, which I believe Kim said had passed at this point.
Yeah, it still,
Yes, it still has to go to the Senate or the Assembly floor though.
Okay. So all 4 of those bills, again, this body has reviewed really in concept. The committee's recommendation on all 4 was to support. To this point, there's been no amendment or changes. So let's open up. Are there any questions, commission discussion on those 4 bills? Okay, seeing none, is there any public, county advisory board comment on those 4 bills? Or public comment? Las Vegas?
No comment, Chairman.
I see no one in Elko. So
Nope.
bring it back to the commission. If there's no discussion on those, I would be willing to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lane.
I make a motion that the commission support AB 35, AB 78, AB 82, and SB 41 as presented through the legislative committee.
I'll second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that the commission support AB 35, AB 78, AB 82, and SB 41 as recommended by the committee. Any discussion on the motion or question? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Commissioner McNitch absent, 8-0. Okay, the next bill on the legislative committee recommendation list was AB 136. Makes various changes relating to wildlife, requiring the department to issue a special hunting license to certain persons with disabilities, providing exemption from requirement to complete a course in the responsibilities of hunters for certain persons with disabilities, and authorizes a person hunting with archery equipment to carry a firearm. Again, the legislative committee's recommendation was that we oppose AB 136 as written. We do endorse provision that we support statutory language that would empower the commission to adopt regulation to accommodate those with disability with respect to hunters' education, licensing, and manner of take for fish and game, and that we support statutory language on carry of firearms during archery season, but there would be some limitation in terms of what type of firearm consistent with our temporary regulation already adopted based on the public input we received. If you'll recall, the restriction we put on carrying a firearm during the archery season was that it had to have a barrel shorter than 8 inches in length and that it could not contain a scope. As Kim mentioned, there was discussion and NDOW offered an amendment requiring them to make accommodations for the American with Disabilities Act for the hunter safety course. And it would also add the muzzleloader season in terms of being able to carry that firearm with those restrictions. So my recommendation, or my thought would be to maybe consider supporting the recommendation out of the committee and having a discussion specific to whether or not we would endorse that sort of carry during the muzzleloader season. Any questions on that bill? Okay, hearing none. County Advisory Board input, maybe 136.
Available language.
Come on up.
I do have the amendment on file if you want.
Bob Rittenhouse, Douglas Camp, where would we get the language of change in the disabilities portion of what they're considering?
Kim, has that been posted to Nellis yet?
Well, our amendment has, and I have it right here, if you want to look at it. I have it on, let's see if I can, I wonder if I can put it up there for you. How do we put it up here, Katie?
You're gonna have to turn the screen on. You guys need any copy of this?
So, Mr. Rittenhouse, in short, outside of the meeting today, the best place to access that is through the Nevada Legislative website. And if you pull up online our committee report, there's a box at the top that talks about accessing the original language of the bill, and then going to the Nevada Electronic Legislation Information System, which will have all the proposed amendments, the history of the bill, and everything else. So outside the meeting, that's going to be your best spot to access the one.
Thank you, because we called Mr. Wheeler's office to try to get clarification on that, and I haven't done the answer.
I'm Jolly for the record, so what I did was, the part previous to this, we struck, so that's purple. I'll just go back so you don't have to just trust me, but we struck all of this in our amendment.
And the stricken language was the portion that provided a special
Exemption from hunter education, right? That takes out all of that exemption from hunter education and left with a new green section. In the course of instruction in the responsibilities of hunters required in NRS 502.303, Section 2, the Department of Wildlife shall not discriminate and shall provide reasonable accommodations in accordance with Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, as amended, provisions contained in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. All of this is from, we have a civil rights audit every 5 years from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they analyze all of our regulations, laws, hunter ed transcripts, or what do you call it, sign-in sheets, program, everything to see that we're complying with this anyway. And in the testimony from Elko, it was testified to that in Elko, students with disabilities that went to hunter education were not provided reasonable accommodations, such as verbal testing, even though we do so in Reno and other places. Whether or not that happened or not, I'm not to say, but we are supposed to do that anyway. So that's what we have here. We won't discriminate, we will provide reasonable accommodations. And let's see, then, is this the right one? Yeah. And then down here, instead of what they had, which was just a person is allowed to carry up a firearm for self-defense during archery season, we have this green language that's added under archery or muzzleloader regulations, and then with a barrel length of less than 8 inches and without a scope for self-defense.
Any other questions by the commission on this one? Or discussion on any of the amendments?
Chairman, I'd just make a comment. I think the initial concern that the legislative committee had with the bill as proposed was it made a blanket exemption from hunter's ed for any type of disability. And the committee thought that a blanket exemption like that was a little too far, that, it shouldn't necessarily be an exemption, but an accommodation, and let's work with it to address the intent of what we thought the bill was introduced, so.
Right. Is there discussion? Okay, is there any cab or public comment on AB 136? Mr. Martin, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, is that on? Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Doug Martin, Car City Cab, for the record. Our cab did vote not to support this as written, and our objections are all being addressed right here. And so I think you've taken care of everything that our objections were with these changes. And then I'll put on my Hunter Ed hat. And I personally, as a hunter education volunteer, had a real problem exempting someone from Hunter Ed. And so I think these are really good things. And so I'm sure that our cab, this is what we would support. So thank you.
Okay. Additional public comment specific to AB 136? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Ask if there's any further discussion. If not, I would be looking for a motion, perhaps one that speaks to the original language, and if the commission's comfortable, perhaps one that speaks to the now amendment that you're being reported.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission take a stance in opposition to AB 136 as it was originally introduced.
Is there a second?
I would second that as originally introduced.
Okay. And any discussion on the amendment that we had just reviewed?
I thought you wanted that in a separate motion.
Okay, let's take that one then. Any discussion on that motion to oppose AB 136 as originally introduced? Commissioner Bless.
I have one question. Did this language originally have some language in it for the assistance in retrieval of game? And did it get taken out, or where's that at?
That was mentioned, but it was never in the language. They had discussion about that. Well, actually, I don't know how much discussion there was, Director Wesley, about that. I know that in talking offline, that was the intent, but they never indicated that in any language.
For some reason, I thought I seen it in language.
In the original language, there was a provision to allow someone, an able-bodied person, essentially to accompany the person with the disability. I had some discussions with the department on trying to provide that as something in part of their amendment. There was a feeling that we weren't able to do that without providing a special license. And so I don't think the amendment at this point provides that, although the committee did recommend that we support providing authority to this board to develop regulations on it. So if that's something that we'd like to incorporate into our recommendation, we certainly can.
I guess if it's going to complicate this particular language, then I'm okay with the way it is, but I would like to see it come in another form, or if this is the only spot that we can, or then we need to do something. If there's another avenue, then I think it should be addressed. It's a very valid issue. And
Kim Gully, for the record, this is the original language that was submitted. And while it does say, during the hunt, a supervisor hunter shall ensure that the person with a disability safely handles and operates the firearm or weapon used,
and complies with all applicable laws, I did not see any language in there on the retrieval. I know there was the chief game warden turnip seed and a number of other individuals discussed different options with that, but it wasn't in here, and honestly, like, I can have one of them come up and discuss. That opens up some other statutes and some other issues that I'm not sure that this is the hunter education chapter. So there's a number of other, like, I don't know, 4 other NRSs. So, but that's something that we've noted, because we did have a lot of people during the committee talk about other things to accommodate, and we wanted to, because of how the session's going so quickly, and people aren't even reading their own bills, and things are getting pushed, that especially with accommodating certain persons, we want to make sure that we're matching the accommodation to the disability and not just trying to squeeze something in because of the timing, because we could do that and then it not actually help someone or meet a different, there's mobile disabled, there's hearing, there's vision, there's a number of different areas.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I appreciate getting it right. But, I think mobility impaired would define that. But I understand the complications of having different capitals and everything like this, but.
And another thing, the individual, the constituents that this bill was aimed at helping were mentally disabled and physically disabled, but I don't know what exactly the disability was, but they weren't just focused on mobility, so that, I guess I can ask for any support right now from anybody who wants to speak to that.
Well, Chief Game Warden Turnip Seed comes up, I think what I would say to Commissioner Bliss is if we wanted to adopt a platform that the commission be provided the regulatory authority to make those accommodations, I think that would be a fair platform. I'm looking at this bill and talking with staff, I don't know that this particular bill is the proper vehicle to get there.
Okay, I understand that, but if there was the easier way and the best way is the way we should go about it, so I'm interested to hear what he has to say.
Chief Warden Turnip Seed, or did you have a point, Brad?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, I believe when the legislative committee addressed this bill, when we proposed that it be amended to accommodate those with disabilities in Hunter's Ed, we went further and said we'd also like to have the statutory authority as the commission to make sure we can address any type of disability with respect whether it's hunter education or hunting in the field or whatever that may be. I believe that was what we.
It was, and the motion before us, and we probably need to address this before we get onto a tangent on other platforms, is the motion on the table is to oppose as introduced. So that doesn't incorporate the committee recommendation to look into that authority. So we can either withdraw that motion or take a vote on that and maybe try it again. That's where we sit right now. But before we do that, Chief Turnipseed, could you address the discussion that just occurred?
Bet Tyler Turnipseed, Chief Game Warden at Department of Wildlife, to address Commissioner Bliss's thoughts. We sat down and tried to figure out a way to make concessions for disabled hunters to have assistance in following up an animal that's been wounded and runs off, both for some of the groups that are helping out on these hunts, and we greatly appreciate those efforts and want to see that continue. As of yet, I haven't figured out how to word that without opening up a giant can of worms, I guess. And it would be, once I sat down and started looking at it, there are 3 or 4, maybe 5 statutes that would have to be amended, plus another handful of regulations that would go along with them. Not saying that it couldn't be done, just that we would want to be careful doing it. And as this hearing was coming up, we didn't want to rush it too much on this particular bill up on the assembly side. So I think it's something that we can look at, just wanted to be cautious going into this particular bill on it. Because there is an issue, you know, if either an entity such as, you know, Outdoorsmen in Wheelchairs or Dreamkeeper Foundation, or a private person, a parent or a guardian or an assistant or whatever, if one of those people is assisting a disabled person on a hunt, or mobility impaired person on a hunt, and, you know, if there's an unfortunate incident in which an animal gets wounded and runs up the mountain half a mile in which the hunter can't go after it, it'd be nice if we could make an allowance for the assistant to go finish that animal off. But like I said, it would take an adjustment of several statutes, including 501(376), which is our holy grail of, you know, big game poaching statutes. We have to be really careful how we open that. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah,
muddy the waters further?
I understand, but it is important, and it's something that we need to try to figure out sometime or somehow, but I understand the situation, but it is valid.
You bet. And I meant to reach out to you on that exact discussion because of your involvement with the group. So in the future, as we sit down and try to figure it out, I'll definitely get in touch with you.
Yeah, and I want to make sure it's not just, you know, that group that I'm involved with. It's any disabled person. I'm just familiar with helping folks that are mobility impaired and see the struggle for them to get there. And I think it's just right for the wildlife and the person to be able to have that. So.
Absolutely, and as you said, not just one specific group, but anybody that's doing that. There's no more noble pursuit than that. And I'd like to help you with that.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussions on the motion on the table, which is to oppose AB 136 as introduced? Seeing none, I just have one. I'll support the motion that was made to oppose as introduced. I understand that this is probably not the best vehicle to do what we want to do in terms of providing accommodations to disabled sportsmen, but I do think it's incumbent upon this commission and the department to try and figure out a way to do that. And if there's a proper vehicle in this session, then maybe we look at that, but I don't know that we've addressed it at this time. So that's where I stand on the motion that's on the floor. Any other discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Before we move off AB 136, is there another motion in regards to the Endow amendment? Or do we want to stay silent?
Chairman, are we premature in making a recommendation at this point in time, ongoing amendments?
I don't believe that we are, only because I think the amendment that's been presented to us today is the same amendment that was presented to the bill sponsors. So I'm comfortable with it. At that point, it has been formally presented to them.
That amendment was presented to them by the department.
Correct. Kim, is that an accurate statement to me? Getting ahead.
I can make a motion then if we're ready.
Okay.
I would move that the commission supports AB 136 with the amendment that the department has presented to the bill sponsor.
Second.
Any further question or discussion on that motion? So the motion is to support AB 136 with the amendment that Endow has offered to the bill sponsor. There's no further discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the next bill that we had recommendation on, and before I get to that, just one announcement to our recording secretary that Commissioner Lane did have to leave to catch a plane to Vegas. So she was absent on the last two votes and will be absent for the rest of the meeting today and tomorrow. The next bill that the committee made a recommendation on is AB 142. Again, this revises provisions governing the administration of enforcement of wildlife laws. Chief Warden Turnipseed, I don't know if you wanted to address anything on this, but the legislative committee recommendation was to oppose the bill. Commissioner Johnston, maybe I'll have you explain some of the concerns with it. Essentially what it would do is remove the commission or department's ability to suspend or revoke any license, essentially rendering the demerit system inconsequential. It would transfer the authority of revoking or suspending a license to a judge of competent jurisdiction. Commissioner Johnson, any further discussion now?
I just had the concern that those who are familiar with, justice and municipal court practice is that, a lot of times things can be bargained away and limitations on certain things, and I would not like to see a scenario where people get to keep their license even if they're a repeat violator, because they could plead guilty to the conviction, take on demerit points, and on the condition that the license isn't revoked, and then this commission would be left powerless to revoke the license. And I could see where the judges sitting and hearing cases may not really understand what that would mean, or different things, or just repeat violators could hold their license despite countless demerit points. So that was one of my concerns.
Chief Turnipseed, anything you'd like to address on this one?
I would just add that Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for the record, and I would just add that if this bill passes as written, it would be extremely damaging to our ability to accomplish our mission in stopping wildlife violators, chronic violators, the repeat offenders, that sort of thing. One of the biggest problems with the bill, even if it were to go turn our authority over to judges to revoke licenses, there's no allowance in the bill to revoke a misdemeanor, only on gross misdemeanors and felonies. So misdemeanors, a person could continue violating the same laws over and over again. There are some pretty egregious misdemeanors, whether it be wanton waste or a lot of aerial hunting stuff. All those are misdemeanors. As this bill is written, you could shoot your deer from a helicopter, cut the head off, leave the carcass to rot, go on about your way, and never lose your privileges if you were caught. Our ability to administratively revoke licenses is critical to our mission. And I would stand for questions if anybody had specifics to look at.
Any questions for Chief Turnipseed? Okay, seeing none, I'll open it up to County Advisory Board or public comment. Reno on AB 142. Mr. Blakesley, did you have a comment? No. Okay, any comment out of Las Vegas on AB 142?
Okay. Yes, Chairman.
Mr. Chair, this is Jana Wright, and I definitely support the Commission's opposition to AB 142. Getting rid of the demerit points doesn't sound very good to me. Thank you.
Stephanie Myers, Lee Canyon, I totally agree. We need to defeat AB 142. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other comment out of Vegas? Elko?
No comment.
Comment, Reno?
I can go over there too. Mr. Chairman, for the record, Bert Greer from the Elko CAB. If you look on the action sheet we sent you, we posted it 3-2. The two of us that opposed it are sitting in the room, and the reason we opposed it was we hadn't read it. We had no clue what we were voting on, didn't know off the line item. I can speak for me and probably for Mitch now too, and say it'd be 5-0 to oppose this bill.
Thank you. Additional comment, Reno? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the Commission. Any further discussion on AB 142? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to be support AB 142 as suggested by the Legislative Committee.
Would that be opposed?
To oppose, yes.
Is there a second? Second. So it's been moved and seconded to oppose AB 142 as introduced and as recommended by the Legislative Committee. Any discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. I think we're down to 6 as Commissioner Morai stepped out of the room. 6-0. Okay, SB 4. provides exemption from certain registration requirements for the trapping of wild mammals on private property. The legislative committee's recommendation was to support SB 4 in concept of removing private property from registration requirements that the legislature has or may adopt, but do so with in a simplified manner and not reference to NRS 207.200, which requires posting and apply to all private property. Any other comments from committee members or questions by the commission? Maureen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Maureen Hellinger, Nevada Department of Wildlife. I first became aware of the subsection B on number 2 just last week. I have concerns from my program standpoint in regards to our special licenses and permit holders. If you read the section, it's, from the beginning, it says, except as otherwise provided in subsection 2, each trap, snare, and similar device used in the taking of wild mammals must be registered with the department before it is used by a person. And then if you go to subsection 2 and you read part B, for the control of rodents by an institution of Nevada system of higher education as an exception. I have scientific collection permittees that are out in the field with the universities or even as a private contractor for some of the mines or down at the base that are out doing studies to make sure that there's no environmental impact. They do trap mammals, but it's a catch and release. They do use traps, snares, and other devices to do that. This exception would leave them vulnerable to having to mark all their traps, which they're not currently having to do because they're doing studies. We have university graduate students doing studies as part of their thesis and filing project reports. So had I seen this a little sooner, I would have come forward a little sooner. That's my concern with the exception. It's very restrictive and leaves some of our special licensees and permit holders having to register traps for their projects at a cost.
Right, Maureen, before we leave, the committee recommendation was to essentially simply make it an exemption for any trap on private property, which in our opinion would eliminate the need for the exemption number 2B. Would that address your concern?
I think so, as long as we keep those in mind, you know, because they're doing studies, wildlife studies. Private property, no, it's on public land.
So that wouldn't help.
It could be, it depends. I mean, it could be happening on the base or something, but I don't federally owned, that I had concerns when I first read this that they were going to get left out of an exemption.
Okay. Questions by the commission? Commissioner Bliss?
For Maureen, what would it put them out if they had to have them identified in a way like everybody else's trap? I mean, a trap's a trap, and whether they're doing it for research or anything else, I guess I don't understand what the hardship would be as far as registering their trap.
Financially, it's not much of a hardship for them, but they've been exempted in the past, and this would be a change for them. So I just felt a need to point out that it's a change in that regard.
And I agree with the change. If it passes, it's going to be a change for everybody to have to start doing it. But
currently trap registration is I believe a may versus a must. So we do still have people registering whether it's required or not. They just choose to do so on their own.
Any other commission questions or comments? Mr. Schoberg, did you have a comment?
Yes, Chairman, Commissioners, I just wanted to follow up on Maureen's comments relative to this and the impact on scientific research. What she's talking about is researchers who may be affiliated with the universities here or universities from other states. Again, private contractors who are doing research for a variety of purposes. And we're not talking about leg hold traps or snares here. We're talking they may be putting out dozens or hundreds of small mammal traps and things like that as part of these studies. So this represents a significant change and probably burden to them in terms of their ability to do active research. And I would suggest that an exemption for research or something similar might be a way to address that. But, or those who are operating under a state scientific collection permit. But it does represent something more than just someone putting out a few traps on the landscape. A lot of these studies are pretty large scale, and they're focused on usually non-game and small mammals and things like that.
Additional questions or comments?
So, a question, I guess, if you took this statute that's up here and you looked at that section 2B and removed the language for the control of rodents, so that the exception in B just said by an institution of the Nevada System of Higher Education or any other federal, state, or local government agency, would that address the issue?
Think of that first. So like, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, too much, just for the control of rodents.
Yeah, that's, well, Kim Jolly, for the record. There was a hearing, well, it was an unrelated hearing, but this came up. This control of rodents was the whole mousetrap issue. So, I mean, I don't know how to get into that, but that they needed some express exemption for the control of rodents, or else they thought that it would include mousetraps, and I don't know if the author would accept that, but, I mean, it's certainly not the cleanest version that it could be.
No, I think it'd be public property.
This is, it's not on prep work.
All right, any other questions on this one? Comments?
Government, wherever.
All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this out to public or CAB comment, SB4. Any in Reno? Las Vegas?
No comment, Chairman.
Okay, Elko?
No comments in Elko.
Okay, I believe we do have one in Reno. Mr. Blakesley, come on up.
For the record, Joe Blakesley, Nevada Trappers Association. I think probably everybody, maybe Mr. Valentine knows how we feel about this. I would ask you to support this bill, but I would also like to ask you to support that we have an exemption as well. I mean, if it's a righteous bill, let's exempt fur trappers. Thank you.
Additional public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Clearly, this has a few more words to it than it did when we reviewed it as a legislative committee, so one option would be to defer it back to the legislative committee to try and work on these issues or concerns, or if you guys think you have information today, we can move forward with the motion. Suggestions one way or the other?
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we send it back to the legislative committee and let's talk about it on our April 1st meeting.
If that's a motion, I'd second it.
It's a motion.
Then I second it.
Okay, any discussion on that? Motion is to reference SB4 back to the committee for further discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, SB4 will be referred back to legislative committee. The next bill is SB 130. This one's pretty straightforward. SB 130 would convert the Department of Wildlife into the Division of Wildlife under the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The legislative committee chose to recommend opposition to this bill. There was a hearing on the bill. In the hearing, there was an amendment proposed by some individuals to consolidate the county advisory boards into 3 regional advisory boards, and that 85% of all the $3 predator fee be transferred, or 85% of the $3 predator fee be transferred to Wildlife Services. I don't know that those are formal amendments that have been adopted by the sponsor, but those two concepts did come up in the hearing. So I just wanted to give people the heads up that those had been proposed. Any questions at this point on SB 130? Any county advisory board or public comment at this time on SB 130? Mr. Baird?
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Bert Kerr from the local CAD. We're in opposition to this, but we were also told that Senator Cheatham, it was dead. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was gone. John Carpenter told us that, but we are in opposition to it, especially the amendment about the super CAD.
Who is that?
Additional comment, someone's on. Just be careful with whatever you're saying. Additional comments in Reno? Mr. Rittenhouse?
Robert Rittenhouse from Douglas County. We discussed the matter and are in opposition to the transfer to agriculture.
Thank you. Additional public comments in Reno? Mr. Bunch, come on up. Doug, come on in right behind.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral County. In general discussion and the public comment part of this, we did discuss this. We encouraged all of our people to go out and talk to their people and go get on the internet and show that we don't support this bill with the fact of where it was headed, what it was intended to be. But the other side of it is, I guess, if they do redo the advisory boards, I would have to retire. Thank you.
Not letting you retire.
We won't let that happen, Glenn.
Doug Martin, Carson City. We did not discuss this bill in our cab. I'm speaking as Doug Martin, and the possibility of creating 3 super cabs would then dilute all of the input that we give. Importantly, we have a lot of rural input, and it will all of a sudden become Northern Nevada, Southern Nevada, and the rural, so it would be a 2-to-1 voice, and you would kind of dilute what the purpose of cabs. I certainly don't support it, and if it goes forward, I'll certainly be there testifying that I don't support a lot of these provisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment in Reno? Seeing none. Public comment in Las Vegas on SB 130?
No comment, Chairman.
Okay. And Elko looks empty.
Yeah, none in Elko.
Okay. I'll bring it back to the commission. Is there any other questions or discussion on SB 130 at this time? I guess I would just say that it had been brought up that potentially the bill had been pulled. And I have talked to the bill sponsor. The bill hasn't been pulled. It's not likely to go forward in its current form. But it is likely that there may be something in regards to cabs and the $3 predator fee still in play. So we haven't seen anything. It hasn't been scheduled for work session. It sounds like it will actually go forward as a workshop, which is more of an informal thing to discuss some of these matters. But at this point, it's not formal on the table. It hasn't been formally withdrawn. So that's about as much as I know at this time. Any other discussion or questions by the commission? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I don't know if it's a motion, Commissioner, but I think with the workshop coming up, and the amendments that we know have been proposed with respect to consolidating the cabs and transferring predator fee money from the department to the Department of Agriculture, at least 85% of it. I think we should have a discussion on that as to whether or not we want to have a position as a commission going into the workshop on those 2 issues.
Okay.
And, you know, my point of view on that, I can't support consolidation of the citizen advisory boards. I think it's important to hear from each county individually. And secondly, I cannot support $3 predator money being collected and then go to the department of ag, where I'm unclear how the sportsmen are paying the fee would have any input on then how it's spent. They have input now through the CAB process, the Predator Committee, and this commission. So, you know, if I have to make a motion, my motion would be that we oppose SB 130 as it was presented, consistent with the recommendations of the Legislative Committee, and that this commission also opposed the proposed amendments to consolidate the cabs into 3 regional cabs and transfer 85% of the predator fee money to the Department of Agriculture. I do have, the only concern I have with that is these amendments probably were not known to the cab, so we don't have their input, but time's critical, and I think we need to have a position as a commission going into the workshop.
Okay, do I have a second?
I would second that.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second, and the motion is to oppose SB 130 as presented, and also to develop a commission platform opposed to consolidation of the county advisory boards, as was proposed in the hearing, and also a commission platform to oppose the transfer of the $3 fee to the Department of Agriculture, or at least 85%.
That is correct.
Okay. Because we've incorporated a little bit more than what was originally in SB 130, I'm going to open it back up to any public comment on that motion, just to make sure we have an opportunity for everyone to provide input if they'd like to. So is there any public comment on what's been discussed and what's before you at this point?
No comment in Las Vegas.
Okay.
None in Elko.
Okay. And I see none in Reno. So with that, is there any further question or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. The next bill that the committee made recommendation on is SB 163, which creates the Advisory Council on Nevada Wildlife Conservation and Education. The committee supported the concept in SB 163 so long as the council is required to educate the general public on the following: history of wildlife in Nevada, the benefits of wildlife to its citizens, wildlife management, and wildlife recreational opportunities within the state. In terms of the fee, the committee recommended remaining neutral on fees until we got feedback from county advisory boards. So that's the recommendation. Are there any questions or discussion by the commission at this time?
I would just make a comment as to some of the rationale for the committee's suggested changes to SB 163. There is, I think it was in Colorado, they've done a similar public outreach, but the experience has been to make it a broader educational outreach to the public than what this bill initially proposed. That's why, as a legislative committee, we took the stance that we did, so that we would have the ability, and for that council would have the ability and flexibility to model their program after what has been done in Colorado with what in my understanding is quite a bit of success.
Yeah, just to, I guess, get everyone up to speed, there was a hearing held on this and an amendment offered that did broaden that authority. My understanding is that there may be additional amendments coming specific to the fees, but at this point it's unclear. The amendment did include, I think it was a $3 fee increase to support this program for in-state sportsmen, and a $9 fee for out-of-state sportsmen. And I'm being told that it's on the screen behind me. So with that, any other questions or discussion by the commission? Seeing none, public comment or CAB comment in Reno. Mr. Reese, come on up.
For the record, Mike Reese, Clark County CAB. We did discuss this. We had a split vote, 5-1. The dissenting vote was basically because he hadn't read the bill, didn't really understand it, didn't feel comfortable about voting on it. The other 5 were in favor of this. You are correct, this did start originally in Colorado. However, since that's happened, Michigan has adopted it. They have another form of it, and right now Nevada and Oregon are proposing this bill at this time. So we are adamantly in favor of doing this. We think it's great, and we think it's about time that some of the benefits of wildlife and our sporting community gets out. With $409 million injected in our economy, I mean, that's not a drop in a bucket, but we learned at an early age, you own something, it's because you purchased it. If somebody gave it to you, it's a gift. And you look the gift giver in the eye and say, thank you. And I think it's time that they realize who's been footing the bill and why. And this in itself can benefit the whole entire state by educating everybody on what really goes on. So I'm in hopes that you guys support this. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, come on up. Joel, you'll be right after him.
For the record, Doug Martin, Carson Wildlife Advisory Board. Our board did take an action and unanimously supports this program, and we hope that you do also. Thank you very much.
Mr. Blakesy.
For the record, Joe Blakeslee, Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. This will be workshopped on Thursday at 1:30. There'll be some amendments that are brought forward. The concept that we like on this is the next one we're talking about, which is SJR 11, which is the constitutional amendment. That has to go to another legislature and then a vote of the people. This should put some education out there prior to that, and so we hope those two things will dovetail together. So, thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment, Reno? Got a couple, come on down.
Bob Rittenhouse, Douglas County CAB, we did discuss the matter at our meeting and full support once the details get wrapped out as far as the fees and what have you, but the concept we're 100% behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea, come up.
Sean Shea, Washoe County. We actually looked at this on our last meeting, the meeting before, and this was voted on, and it was 4-1. We are in favor of this whole concept, so you can look at that, yeah.
Thank you. Additional comment, Reno? Mr. Volz?
Record Fred Volz. I'm in strong opposition to this bill. One, I think it's a private function and it needs to be funded privately. There is no reason for a new tax to fund this operation. And secondly, the composition of the council has no relationship to the diversity of this state and its population and interests. It's all about promoting the glories of hunting, trapping, and fishing with no counterbalancing information provided given the structure of the council. Thank you.
Additional public comment, Reno? Seeing none, any public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Jana Wright. I'm in opposition to Senate Bill 163. The Department of Wildlife currently has a department to educate Nevadans on hunting, fishing, and trapping. Hunting, fishing, and trapping are legal activities in Nevada. This bill is not necessary. It's just an end around to have money in a fund so that they can promote SJR 11. I'm in opposition. Thank you.
This is Stephanie Myers from Lee Canyon, Mount Charleston. I'm also in opposition to this bill. Colorado citizens had already banned by public initiative trapping, and so trapping was not involved in their campaign. And if the Colorado model is to be pursued as a video model for Nevada, I am personally offended. I'm offended by the idea that I should hug a hunter, hug a trapper. Am I really expected to hug the trapper who trapped and severely injured my dog? This PR campaign for hunting, trapping, and fishing is just propaganda. Now, if you leave out trapping, which every ethical hunter and angler ought to do, if you leave out trapping, then I'm not opposed. Thank you very much.
I think that's everyone in Vegas. Any comment in Elko?
None in Elko.
Okay. One last call for Reno. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee. I guess my recommendation would probably be to stick with the legislative committee recommendation, staying neutral on the fees and supporting the broad concept with a broader message at this point, just because I know there's some things changing with the fees, and I don't think the cabs have been able to discuss that in detail to this point for the public for that matter. So, but that's my thoughts. What's the flavor of the commission? If there's no discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to support the legislative committee's recommendation on SB 163.
Second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to adopt the committee's recommendation as a commission on SB 163. Is there any discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. AJR 2 urges the United States Congress and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to take certain actions to reduce the impact of common ravens on the greater sage-grouse population in the state. The legislative committee recommendation was to support AJR 2. Any further discussion or questions on AJR 2? Seeing none, public comment or cab comment on AJR 2? Reno? Seeing none, public or cab comment in Las Vegas?
No comment, Chairman.
Elko?
None in Elko.
Okay. Bring it back to the board. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the commission support AJR 2, consistent with the committee's recommendation.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to support AJR 2 consistent with the committee recommendation. Any discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Next bill is SGR 1, urges Congress to enact legislation transferring title to certain public lands to the state of Nevada in accordance with the report prepared by the Nevada Land Management Task Force. The legislative committee recommendation was to oppose SGR 1 due to conflicts with Commission Policy 64. Commission Policy 64, if you'll recall, is specific to land transfers, suggesting that the commission not support land transfers unless it were beneficial to wildlife and also supported public land access. Any questions or discussions on SGR 1?
I'd make a comment, the same comment that I made to the legislative committee. One, we do have the commission policy in place, but the opposition to SGR 1 is not without recognition to issues with respect to federal management of public lands. We were not saying that the federal government was doing the job we think they ought to be doing. It was issues related to transfer. And I recognize that certain industries obviously have a lot of issues with federal land management, and I was not, by opposing SJR 1, suggesting that we were ignoring that in any way.
Any public comment or cab comment in Reno on SGR 1? Come on up.
Hello again, Jeanette Dean representing the Sierra Club today. We are also opposed to SJR 1. We believe the bill is very unclear. In page 3, it talks about the transfer of 7.2 million acres, yet it goes on to say that within 10 years after the initial phase, many more types of lands could be transferred. We know BLM has over 42 million under its control, the Forest Service about 5 million. So we don't want anyone thinking this would just involve 7.2 million acres. And even that we believe is far too much. We have had oil and gas leases recently going for as low as $2 an acre. They've nominated many lands that they'd like for oil and gas leases, and BLM did reject many of those, but under state control, due to the need for money for fire control techniques, fire combatants, along with management of horses, we do believe they would be under severe pressure to sell a lot of those lands immediately. And we hear that you did not testify at the hearing, and we would urge you to also testify during proceedings. Thank you.
Additional public or cab comment in Reno? Seeing none, Las Vegas? I see head shaking. Elko?
No comments.
Okay. Bring it back to the commission. SGR1, any further discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that the commission oppose SJR1 as recommended by the legislative committee.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to oppose SGR1 as suggested by the legislative committee, specific with conflicts to Commission Policy 64, as that was part of the committee recommendation. Any question or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, SGR1 is done. The next one is SGR5, expresses support for the 2014 Nevada Greater Sage-Grouse Conservation Plan developed by the Sagebrush Ecosystem Council and urges the United States Fish and Wildlife Service not to list greater sage-grouse as endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act of 1973. The legislative committee's recommendation on this was to support as presented. Any further discussion or question on SGR5? Seeing none, public comment or cab comment in Reno? Okay, seeing none, any comment in Las Vegas?
No comment in Las Vegas.
Elko?
No comment in Elko.
Bring it back to the committee. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll move to support SGR 5 as suggested by the legislative committee.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the legislative committee recommendation on SGR 5 to support. Any question or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that gets us through the list that had been recommended by the legislative committee. I think what I'll do is, it's taken us a while to get through that. I'm going to take a 15-minute break. When we come back, we'll come back to 8C. I'm a little bit reluctant as a body to go through any of the bills that we haven't had an opportunity to review language on. But maybe what we can do is have a discussion from the audience and members of the commission in terms of which bills they would like us to see on our watch list to address through the legislative committee next time we meet, and we'll go from there. So with that, we'll reconvene at 4:15.